And I'm multitasking here. And welcome to tonight's episode of Patriot Princess Podcast, P3, the power of three. It's my trinity, my spirit trinity, my light magic, my dark magic. And when you combine, canna magic, right? I am here tonight by myself. The last couple episodes I've had some guests on, and tonight we're going into, we've been in some really powerful energies for the last few days, and we're getting ready to go into the start of the year of the horse. The 17th is our first day of that. Thank you, Mother Cannabis, for all your gifts. You're here with me tonight as I talk about this. Ooh, I'm a poet. Didn't even know it, right? Thank you, Mother Cannabis, for being here for this. For all of your gifts. Stuff's been crazy for me lately, and it's all, when you're not in alignment with your authentic true self, and the universe gives you that squeeze of okay, the less authentic you are, the more uncomfortable we are going to make you until you step into your authenticity. So authentically, I'm enjoying a joint while we discuss this. Ceremonially, for the relaxation of anxiety and the things that come along with the subject matter I'm going to be talking about. Just trigger warning. Tonight I'm finally sharing my truth of I was live streaming on TikTok and I got a restriction already. I already got a restriction. What in the world? Do I have to hide that? Okay. That's ridiculous. Ooh. Meditation alarm. So, tonight I'm sharing the truth of what has really been going on over the last year, most of my life, but the things that have really come through for me about stepping into purpose, stepping into a calling, and shedding light in the dark, being a voice for the voiceless. And I was really inspired by another awesome creator that I have been following on TikTok, who he shared something yesterday that just really hit me, and it was based on the fact of, if you aren't standing up for what you believe in, then you've already chosen a side, and you've chosen the other side. And I have been riding both sides of the fence lately, in the spiritual realm and the 3D realm, and it's which side are you going to pick? Where are you going to go with this? And you got to pick a lane. You got to pick a side. And so here I am picking a side and telling the real truth publicly of what has been going on for the last year. Because once I actually tell people in person and have this conversation, they're like, wait, I'm sorry, what has been going on? And it's related to spiritual awakening, going through a divorce, and again, shedding light on the systems that don't work in America. Not that it's my responsibility to wake anybody else up, but to actually like share the information about what you've been going through and share your story, because I've met so many other women going through similar things. And we have been divorcing narcissists, and the thing about recognizing it is that a lot of them have been trained to do what they're doing, but a lot of them are also men who've never learned to be told no. And there's been a running theme through my life and many other women that I know, that when you tell a man no, you suddenly become the bad guy. You're suddenly the one who is persona non grata because they don't like to be told no. And I had a massive spiritual awakening a little over a year ago. And in that process, also was able to really look back on the other times in my life where spirit, my true self, was really trying to come through and show me that like karmic loop that I came here to break. And went back into it. But this week it was I have 2 daughters. It was their birthdays. My youngest turned 3 on Wednesday, and my oldest just turned 5 today. And speaking up for what I believe in and what I know, and stepping back into my power as a, divine being. We're here in the middle of this great awakening. It is the apocalypse, so to speak, and it's just not the, biblical that it was made out to be. Apocalypse actually means, I was looking the other day at the thinning of the veil, the lifting of the veil, and people are starting to see behind. It's like Oz. Who's behind the curtain? Like a Wizard of Oz. Who's behind the curtain? Right? We're lifting the curtain back. We're finding out that who's been running the country, who's been running the world. I'm gonna, keep it minimal in my descriptive words for the purposes of not getting banned at this point. But, Epstein files are out, and they're asking for a reaction when you find out what's really going on in the collective, and you find out the truth about stuff. And oh look, this little mushroom popped up. And mushrooms are something I'm going to talk about as the basis of increasing your neuroplasticity, helping with trauma healing, and getting connection with the higher realms. I just got an email that says you are loved. Right? We're all loved. It's all about unconditional love. But it's a call to action when you realize who is running stuff, and that we're here to be the change. And so what's going on right now? What's happening? And being apart from my children for their birthdays this week, and then Valentine's Day in the middle, finally standing up for myself is what I'm doing. And that's also related to speaking my truth. And I will tell you, I have been looping and being quiet and inconsistent for months because of the scenario that I went through in my divorce proceedings. And see, what had happened was, when you go back into the history, I married my alcoholic, narcissistic mother is what happened. Anybody else? Anybody else marry their mother or their father, so to speak? But it's learned behavior. And this is what what happens with trauma survivors is you learn to appease the most dysfunctional person in the room, because that is how you stay safe. And growing up, my parents split up when I was young. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was the people pleaser. I very much learned how to appease my mother and make her comfortable, because that's how I stayed safe. And then you learn to do that with other people. You also, in the same tune, if you have a similar experience, learn not to ask for help. You're actually taught not to ask for help, because if you're going to someone else asking for help because of the unsafe situation that you're existing in at home, then you're in trouble at home with, now you've asked for help and people are asking questions, and the person in the seat of power doesn't want to be found out, especially when a child is questioning them. 11 on the timer when I said that. And so I repeated that cycle throughout my life in relationships. Literally every relationship I've been in, I have pretty much dated somebody that ultimately made me the bad guy when I either wanted to break up with them, or once I started dating them, they turned into like a completely controlling individual and wanted to have that power over me. And it was like that claim of like, it was a possession, not a person. And so going through my divorce this last year, and I mean, let's say like, our taking accountability for my part and everything that happened, like 2 weeks before our wedding, I was like, how do I get out of this? It's like all the stuff that culminated where you're realizing, like, I used to ask myself, can I wake up next to this person for the rest of my life? And there were a lot of times where I was like, I don't know. And most of it was related to the alcoholism and the way that I was treated and the way that I was disrespected, really, as not just a woman, but as a partner, as a human being. And I'm not going to sit here and say I was like all perfect in roses. There's a lot of things I probably could have approached better in our relationship too, but a lot of it came from this situation of, hi, Joe 940, of constantly giving people a chance. And that's the other thing that you're taught as a people pleaser. And when you're an empath, when you're a psychic medium, like, not so much the psychic medium playing into that, but the empath, like, you can see people's goodness in their heart. You can see things in them that they can't see in themselves. And this is part of, it's not your responsibility to wake anybody else up. It's not your responsibility to fix anybody. And this is where boundaries come in. But again, when you're a child who has lived under narcissistic control or in a trauma-based environment, you're not taught how to do that. You're not taught conflict resolution. You're not taught boundaries. You're not taught how to protect your energy. You're not taught how to manage your gifts as an empath, or, we all have psychic abilities. We all have telepathic abilities. We just haven't been taught how to use them. And that's where, detoxing your body, plant medicine, all of that comes into effect. Breath work, somatics, clearing out all of the energy blocks in your chakras, etc., so that you can fully connect. But when I was a kid in the 80s, nobody's teaching you how to do that. In fact, we lived in a society who really, pinpointed those of us who were spiritually gifted and intentionally put us in these paths that were blocking our spiritual gifts. And with the phase that we're in right now in the Great Awakening, there's many of us who came here on purpose, who are not Earth native souls. There's a difference between the Earth native souls and starseeds, etc., who came here with an intention to be part of this great event. And part of that contract is you agree to come and be in these totally ridiculously traumatic familial situations, because the trauma is what opens you up to the pattern recognition and the gifts, and you finally see all this stuff that's going on. 9/11 on the timer. choosing to stay in those unhealthy relationship environments, it really puts you in a unique situation. And sometimes it's like you don't know any better. But there was a lot that happened in our relationship, and going over the truth of it, we were together for 12 years, married for 6, and over that 12 years, he was an alcoholic the entire time. And I was regularly in a situation where I was taking care of him and making sure that he was I was trying to stream live while I'm doing this too, but yeah, when you're married, when you're with an alcoholic and you're constantly making sure that he's not hurting himself, that he is, has a way to get home, like you're constantly worried about the drunk driving, you're constantly worried about the behaviors that come as a result of the intoxication. And it's like you feel this responsibility to stay with them and make sure they're safe. And you're taught, like, you're a bad person if you leave them. You're a bad person if you don't support them. And that's not true at all. This is like where we are charged with being an example for our children. We're charged with teaching them properly to set boundaries and to protect their energy, and that they don't like, love thy neighbor as thyself, and we're here to take care of each other and support each other, but you have to take care of yourself first, and you don't have to compromise who you are at all for anyone else because you make someone else uncomfortable. And that's the whole point. Like, we're not meant to change ourselves to make other people feel comfortable. And thank you for those that are liking the live. Please don't forget to go up and get your heart me, share. And I was in this stage where I was getting ready to end our relationship, and then my mom, who was my original alcoholic narcissist, I was really setting boundaries with her, and she had a stroke because of her own alcoholism. And I ended up, that was the first time I had like a really powerful spiritual experience, and it was one of those like moments where everything flashes before your eyes. And I thought it was my responsibility and what I was shown to like be the good daughter to take care of her. And now I know my spirit guides were like, no, we were trying to show you that like it was her own consequences. She was doing what, that was her karma. It wasn't your responsibility to drop your entire life and take care of her. And that's what I did. And I had been at the point where I was ready to break up with my ex, and it's like before you know it, I was moved in, taking care of my mom, cleaning out her house that was like hoarder's paradise, and moving back into her house, and still working full time and hiring in-home caregivers, and like the entire scenario was just like completely overwhelming. I was 32 years old. And this is where like, spiritually, you're more than this body. You are a piece of source here having a human experience, and you're more than this story for everybody. You're not just the story for your like character, but all the things that you experienced go into developing your sight so that you can look at these scenarios and go, oh, this is what's happening here. And how many times do you have to go through that before that kicks in? But yeah, I moved in to take care of my mom, and before I knew it, my ex was, was there to support, to like come in and swoop in and rescue and take care of everything. And then he was like, we'll buy a house where she can always be with us, and you won't have to worry about it. And in hindsight, when you look back on that and you can eagle eye view the entire scenario, if I had been with someone who truly like knew me and respected me, hey everybody that's just joining, don't forget to go up and get your daily heart me and like and share, please. You get credit for that too. If I had been with somebody that truly knew me and truly understood the dynamic with my mother, they would have said, this isn't healthy. Like, no, you shouldn't be taking care of your mother. Like, it's time for you to do your own thing. But, and this is like the hypocrisy in the situation. He used to tell me, I don't really like your mother anyway. I don't think your mother's a good person. But I can't believe that you don't have the contact with her. Like, you as her daughter, you should be nicer to her. You should have more contact with her. And I'm like, well, you don't like her. Why am I supposed to? And I will say, like, not to disrespect your mother, it's taken so much work and time for me to appreciate what my mother went through and realize that she was the way she was because she was a sexual assault survivor. She was the survivor of narcissistic abuse. Like, she was the way she was because what she lived through, but was unable to emotionally process properly. It's where you look back and see what made everybody the way they are. But it's not your responsibility to fix it for them. And yeah, so before I knew it, I was taking care of Mom. We were engaged, buying a house that she could move into with us so that she was always there. And we were getting married like 2 weeks before we were getting married. I was just like, how do I get out of this? How do you get out of a wedding that's at your own house, that you just bought this house for your mother to live in with you and take care of her, and you're like, it's all just... And I went through with it anyway. And it just, even the day of our wedding, it was so obvious. Like, we barely spent any time together. I had to like go out and get him out of the driveway at 3 o'clock in the morning because he was so hammered and he was still out there talking to the bartenders from the wedding. And I'm like, hi, wedding night, and we're leaving for Greece in the morning. Can you please can we please come on in? And bartenders by. There were just so many red flags. I actually did a boudoir shoot with our wedding photographer. So after we got divorced, I scheduled a boudoir shoot with the same photographer that did our wedding. And she was like, yeah, there were so many red flags at your wedding. And I'm just like, why didn't you say anything? You could have said something. And that's the thing that I've realized through all of this is the people around you just like, they're clocking what's going on and they're not saying anything. And that's what's wrong with our society. Like, if you see something, say something. Hi, Fonz. Is that like Fonzie? Like, that's how we look out for each other, right? If you see something, say something. I've been saying something to people my entire life about the toxic relationships that I've recognized, and nobody said anything to me. Anyway, COVID happened very quickly after our wedding, a couple years after our wedding, and I got pregnant with our first child. During COVID, and this is where like really telling a lot of my story comes in, because a lot of what I have been healing is related to SA and grape, and you can see when my body has a response to talking about those things. I'm literally like clenching my like hands right now, prayer hands, because your body is just having a somatic response to the thought of the events. And my oldest daughter was conceived during an act of marital rape. It makes it easier to say when you call it grape instead. There you go. And my ex would tell you till he's blue in the face, that didn't happen, I didn't do that, but you were drunk, you don't remember it. And here's where we get into like what we're teaching our children, our young ladies and our young men about what consent really is. Because even if an act starts out consensually, when someone in that act says, I want to move, or please stop what you're doing, or not even, just stop what you're doing, no, I want to do this, I was actually asking to change positions, and when I did that, I was held down so he could finish. And then at the end, when I said, what the fuck was that? He said, you wanted me to get you pregnant, didn't you? Okay. And those are situations that in America, when other people look at it, it's like they want to think nothing of it. And that's SA. That's assault. And, you know, there's a lot of those red flags to look out for in your body. Like when your body's having a response to the environment that you're in and certain things that are happening, that is your body knowing, like, this isn't safe for us. Like, I'm pulling out my ankh. This was in my pocket. And it was like, hold me, please. And you know, when I bring that up, my ex says that you made that up or that didn't happen. And it's like, but I thought about it every day after that happened and carried that with me, that our child was conceived during that. And actually during my spiritual awakening, my angel showed me, like, you were so dedicated to her during your pregnancy and doing hypnobirth and taking care of your body and yourself. Like, you healed a lot of that. But we pass things down to our children through our genetic line. And, you know, with my oldest, she's already she demonstrates the people-pleasing syndrome. My youngest is the, you know, heart chakra block, where she did not get the nurturing mother that my oldest did when she was little because of everything that I was going through at the time. But, you know, I got pregnant during that scenario in 2020. My oldest was born in February of 21. And this is where, again, all the red flags come up in the narcissistic relationships. There was a lot of control for me to be home with her, and it was during COVID, so we couldn't bring in outside caregivers to help with my mom. So I was taking care of my mom as well. And when I got pregnant with our second daughter, which during my spiritual awakening I learned that was likely immaculate conception, that I manifested that pregnancy myself. So that's interesting, right? And that's when things like drastically changed. Like, yes, I had been still married to an alcoholic who was regularly driving under the influence. It's so intoxicated at home with my children that he couldn't function. And when I got pregnant with my second, he was mad, and that's when a lot changed in our dynamic. And I got so sick through that whole pregnancy. And I actually got shown in my ayahuasca ceremony. He was like draining me of all my energy. His negative energy was literally feeding so heavily off me. That is what made me so sick. And he was so mad that he had to put more effort into taking care of everybody, because there were days where I literally like couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't function. And like red flags galore. Like when my my youngest was born 2 weeks early, and the nursery and everything wasn't done because everything was left to the last minute. He had 2 weeks off paternity leave and was ready to go back to work 2 weeks after I had a C-section, and I was home with an infant, a 2-year-old, my disabled mother who was in a wheelchair, who was a stroke survivor, by myself on a multi-level house 2 weeks after a C-section, a second C-section, with a wound in my uterus the size of a dinner plate after having a baby. And I was made to feel like I was being selfish because I was like, can you not work from home for like another week or two? Or like, can we ask someone in your family to maybe help? Like, when you're with a partner who 2 weeks after you give birth to his child is like literally ready to go back to work and angry at you for asking help with your infant, your 2-year-old, and your disabled mother that you're taking care of, like, major red flags. Those are the scenarios where, like, when everybody around you isn't even bothered by it and everybody's like, you should rest. Okay, well, who else is here doing all the stuff? And this is the weight that the inverted feminine and masculine energies that are occurring in the world right now, especially America. And this is the stuff that, like, in Europe, people get paid paternity leave. Like, you get months off to go home and raise a child, to have a baby. Like, they are our future. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Right? Whitney told us. Whitney was telling us the children are our future. So even regardless of the physical things I had going on, like, we're talking about the quality of the home and environment that our children are growing up in, because it all plays a part in their development. And again, this is my calling of shining light in the dark and calling out the systems that don't work anymore in a way where it's like helping to open your eyes to what is actually going on and happening. Checking computer battery. And I am making a long story very short right now. But I even remember asking his mom to come over and help after I had my second child, and she had one day a week that she wasn't working for her eBay shipping job, and she was like, I'd like to keep that day for myself. And it's kind of like, these are the same people that are in church on the weekends going, family's everything, and I'm like, am I not your family? Are your grandchildren not your family? Is this not everything? Can you not help for a few weeks because I like physically need assistance? And those are the times where it's like you just like, you really take stock of the people that are around you and what they care about. And I'm not making this inherently right or wrong in any way, because everybody's on a different journey. But these are the things where it's like, open your eyes. Like, how are we treating each other? And I actually even cried earlier today talking about something totally different. But as like an empath, like I feel stuff. 33 on the timer. And there was literally earlier today where I just started weeping, and I was like, like, how did we get to this point in humanity where this is how we treat each other? And then people will call themselves Christians while they do it. And it's just like, what? And that's why we're in the Great Awakening, because we have also literally gotten to the point where humanity is waking up to the fact that we've been taught to treat each other this way. And like, because the generation before, his mother wasn't incredibly nurturing because she wasn't nurtured by her mother. It compounds, it passes down. 34. And shortly before I had my second daughter is when I started therapy, and really just realized what an absolute... I'd been begging for years for my ex to get into therapy with me, for, couples or whatever, even for him to go to therapy. He went to a therapist one time, and she told him, like, I don't think you need to come back for regular sessions. And I was like, did you lie to her about your drinking, about your family life? Like, did you tell her the truth? Because I'm pretty sure that a qualified therapist would have told you to keep coming back. But, men's mental health. We don't talk about men's mental health. We don't. I mean, it's getting more prevalent now, finally, because people are waking up to it. I literally have a shirt over here that says men's mental health on it. Be aware of men's mental health, because it's just as important as women. And I had this conversation earlier today with somebody talking about how, women, what everybody's waking up to is this inversion, and women were trained to be subservient, and we, like, the feminist movement gets so mad at men and blames them. You did this, and yes, the patriarchy is all part of it, but we also have to recognize that our masculines have been trained to do that. They have been psychologically programmed to control. And this is where we all have to take a step back and go, let's get this in unity. Like, it's not about one dominating the other. It's about being in union. And that's what's happening right now with the unions of our divine feminine and divine masculine. And we're finding that balance of operating together. And those are the red flags to look for in your relationship if you're with somebody that's not willing to work on those things. Like, I had been asking for therapy for years and just, nope, flat out, never would do it. And I realized in therapy how bad our relationship was, what a toxic relationship I was in. And at that point, honestly, it was like, I didn't at the time know how to get out of it with 2 small children and a lady in a wheelchair. And I fell into like a year and a half of myself of functional alcoholism. I was over 200 pounds, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking 2 bottles of wine, painting a plastic smile on, pretending like everything was okay. And it wasn't at all. And I knew I was with someone who wasn't in love with me. And I stayed with him so long. I was keeping him away from his divine his divine feminine. He wasn't with his person the whole time we were together. And that's when I had like a massive spiritual awakening, going down the Diddy party rabbit hole. Went down that rabbit hole and found out all kinds of the stuff. And then your third eye blows open and you're like, oh my God, it's all real. And everything's crumbling around you, and you realize you're living in this matrix simulation, and you're a psychic medium, and you're in touch with the Galactic Federation and the aliens, and you're channeling, and it all makes sense, and it's like, what is happening right now? And that is like, that's some shit, people. That is some shit that goes on when you have a massive awakening, and there's a lot of people that lose it as they're coming out of the matrix, and I lost it there for a little while, I'll be honest with you. That spiritual psychosis, she's a bitch. Really is. And mine kicked in pretty heavy, very quickly, and I ended up getting to a space where I had to leave my house. Spirit was like, you gotta go. I can't stay here. And here's where we get into like the dynamics of what's going on with the courts and how like all of this 3D stuff plays in is, thanks, John D. John D, by the way, the assistant of Queen Elizabeth in England for entertainment purposes only, was like a super powerful black wizard, and they started all kinds of spells and stuff, and whatnot that was like dark magic back then, putting people under spells and shit. Thanks for that reminder, John D. Where was I? Oh, super massive third eye opening. Immediately realized like what a crazy situation I was in, and was like salting all the doorways and salting all the windows and like buying all this. Like I went to a store and it was just like everything was jumping out at me, and I was getting all this stuff that I'm like, why am I getting this? And it's like detoxing your body stuff. Like all of it was signs and synchronicities, and I went through, this was the fun part. I had been diagnosed with PTSD by my therapist at this point, and I will, again, like, full disclosure, trigger warning, a lot of the stuff that I was working on in therapy and was related to the PTSD was sexual assault as a child. Again, in like middle school, both by family members, and assaulted in college and in adulthood. And a lot of what I was healing was related to narcissistic abuse and sexual assault, sexual trauma. And a lot of the stuff that happened to me as a kid didn't come up for me until I got into therapy and until I had a spiritual awakening. And then all of a sudden, like, I started remembering stuff that had happened. And what 90% of people, that's a overgeneralization. A large percentage of trauma survivors don't realize is a lot of the trauma that they are healing is also generational trauma that has been passed down through your line, your DNA, and you're holding in your tissue, as well as past life trauma, stuff that you have experienced in other incarnations lives in your tissue. And so it's like, you hear people talk about your witch wound and things like that. Like, I actually found out at my ayahuasca ceremony that my ex-husband was my original witch wound in Salem, and he strangled me at a well and buried me in poison ivy. And then all of a sudden, when I found that out, it made sense why there were times when I was totally triggered by him and my whole body would start itching. And I could never understand why. And it was like, oh, because in another timeline, he killed you and buried you in poison ivy for bringing dishonor to the family for being a witch. He was actually my brother in that lifetime. And he strangled me. So literally there were times, especially early in our divorce, where like if I was talking about something that made him mad, or he energetically was like coming after me, I could feel it in my body. And even right now, talking about it a little bit, I feel that throat chakra going. But breaking into all of these downloads and things that were coming through, he thought I absolutely lost it. He thought I was absolutely insane. And so the night my third eye blew open really wide, I could see energy in my child. She was having a tantrum about something, and I can see energy in people. Like if I'm looking at somebody that's out of alignment or under narcissistic control especially, their eyes look like crooked and droopy to me. And like I can see a physical manifestation of what people have going on the inside. And so I saw my daughter have a reaction and start having a tantrum, and I literally was holding her in my arms, praying over her. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. First time I'd ever done anything like that. I grabbed her, held her in my arms, and I was praying negative energy out of her in the name of Jesus Christ. And he started yelling at me and videotaping, and then called my best friends to come over. Actually, I think he'd already called them to come over, but he sent them the video. And so when they arrived, they actually had the police with them. And the police came in, they saw the video, they talked to me, and they were like, we're not concerned about this situation at all. What is it that you would like us to do? And they ended up leaving. My friend was like, I want you to go to a voluntary psych evaluation at the hospital, which I agreed to do. Not escorted by police. I rode with my friend. She stayed with me the whole time. And then they... Ooh, are you joining my fan club? Yay. Thank you. She stayed with me the whole time, and I was telling her all about all of the information coming through, that she and I had been soul sisters. We had been, incarnating through multiple lives together, like helping each other learn different things. And she was a huge X-Files fan when we were younger, and it was like all the stuff in the X-Files that she liked. I'm like, yeah, most of that's pretty much true. So like, I had powers coming in very quickly that night. Like, my telekinesis was in. I looked at this can across the room, and I was like, what is that? And it turned around to look at me, and I was like, oh, shit. I'm pretty sure I just did that with my mind. And then everything went to, like, a screeching halt. Thank you. John D's just sending me roses and joining my fan club and stuff. I love it. Thank you. And so that was in the hospital. So then in the hospital, they're like, what is it? Like, what do you want us to do? She's not on weird drugs. She told us she had cannabis in her system because I was taking it at bedtime, and all of this started going down at bedtime. And they recommended an outpatient psych program, a voluntary program, which I agreed to go to as well. And in said voluntary outpatient psych program, they were like, yes, you're being psychologically, emotionally, sexually, and financially abused, by the way. And I'm like, uh-huh. But then all of the community resources that it gave me were either the waiting list to get assistance was so long that it was going to not be helpful. And it was a mess. And also the psychological programming, you still think like there's other people that need this more than I do. And it's like, no, you need this stuff, lady. And it was wild. So I did this like month-long outpatient program. Through this process, my ex ended up packing up the kids and leaving and taking them to his parents' house, and like not even telling me. There was a day that I gotta plug the laptop in. That we were getting ready to take them to the playground, and he decided that my behavior was just so erratic that he didn't know what to do. I also believe that was the day I told him I wanted a divorce, and we had somebody come over to look at our roof, and I had scheduled it like well before that. It had nothing to do with like, oh, I called this strange person to come over and look at our roof. Like, it was already on the docket. And when he was like, I'm not interested in doing this, and I was like, I am. It was just me standing up for myself and being like, hang on 2 seconds, I'm looking for my plug. Hold that thought, please. Here we go. Now I gotta play jump rope with the laptop cable. Merely the act of me standing up for myself, he was just like, you're acting so erratic, I'm gonna pack our children up and leave. And everybody in the hospital program was like, you should get a protective order. You should call the police. And do you know what I kept doing? No, I don't want to cause a scene. I just kept thinking love and light, love and light. If I am all unconditional love, I'll get the same thing back. And I was so incorrect. It's like the universe showing you over and over again. Like, this person does not give you the respect back that you have given him, and never has. Like, you keep wanting to be a team through this, and you've never been a team through anything that you've done. And that's actually where you, like, learning the boundaries and stuff is coming in. So as things really progressed, I ended up leaving our house last February. It's been a year, because I could not get possession of the home because he wasn't physically beating me so the court wouldn't give me possession of the home and ask him to leave. And this is where, like, again, shining light in the dark and talking about our systems that aren't working from someone who's experienced it, is a diagnosed PTSD survivor leaving their husband with 2 small children and taking care of my adult mother dependent, who is in an outpatient psych program where they're like, yes, she's being psychologically manipulated, abused, emotionally manipulated. The court is like, prove it. How would you like me to prove psychological abuse without all of the examples I'm giving you? And it's like, I couldn't get possession of my home because I wasn't being physically beaten. And also through all of this, being neurodivergent, being autistic, having ADHD, PTSD, like all of it, none of that was taken into consideration at all. And it's like, is anybody going to talk about where the PTSD came from? I mean, it originally started with my mother, but like the fact that, nope. And so again, me moving out of the house into an Airbnb. And also I didn't take my 2 small children with me because my nervous system was shot. My nervous system was absolutely shot. And getting all of it into a balanced state again was the focus. And I didn't know how to do that in an Airbnb with 2 small children by myself. Like, how was I going to balance my nervous system? And I kept asking for a place to be safe, a place to feel safe, a place to feel safe. I just want a place to feel safe. This is, my tattoos are acting up right now, my Trinity. Tattoos, by the way, hold energetic memory and value, and they are very ceremonial. So like if you're talking about something and one of your tattoos starts like itching, or like my I have angel wings tattooed on my back, and when I went through my spiritual awakening when I was around my ex, literally they would like, the outline would raise and get really itchy. And right now Pocahontas is angry. Her throat is getting a lump in her throat right there. A lot of what came through for me in my awakening, and especially after my ayahuasca ceremony, was connecting to my Native American heritage and coming and past timelines that I've experienced where I was Native American. And the one that really came up for me was when I was in Jamestown. I was Native American in the original Jamestown colonization, and it's literally the colonization of women and people that keeps being very strong for me in all of this. And, you know, speaking up as a woman, like, believe women when they tell you what's going on. And I had been reporting this to the people around me. Everybody knew he would drive under the influence regularly. Everybody knew that he was highly intoxicated around our children regularly. Everybody around us knew that there was an issue. They knew that he spoke to me incredibly disrespectfully. They knew that it was like an unhealthy situation, and nobody spoke up. Nobody did anything. And when I finally decided to leave, I was the black sheep, and everybody turned on me for telling the truth. And actually, a big reason I'm sharing this today and right now is because I pulled out my study Bible the other day and flipped right to Amos 5. And the first line I look at, because, you know, I personally get messages through books all the time, and I'm like literally drawn to very specific things that catch my eye. And the first thing that pops up is how you hate honest judges, how you despise people who tell the truth. You trample the poor, stealing their grain through taxes and unfair rent. Therefore, though you build beautiful stone houses, you will never live in them. Though you plant lush vineyards, you will never drink wine from them. For I know the vast number of your sins and the depth of your rebellions. You oppress good people by taking bribes and deprive the poor of justice in the courts. So those who are smart keep their mouths shut, for it is an evil time. Do what is good and run from evil so that you may live. We're talking about the Lord God of heaven's armies will be your helper. And when you look down at like interpretations of some of these specific passages, it's when money and power displace truth and justice, people are under pressure to keep quiet and overlook or condone the ploys of the powerful. Christ's followers should resist being intimidated by rules and systems that trample on the powerless and silence the voiceless. God advocates for the oppressed and his followers, and you should do the same. And doing good goes hand in hand with seeking God. God meant for his people to protect the poor. They could show their change of heart by sweeping away their corrupt system of false accusations, bribery, and corruption, and by insisting that only just decisions be given. We dare not read this passage lightly or write it off simply as encouragement to be good. It is a command to reform our own legal and social system. It is a command to reform our own legal and social systems. And a society is in trouble when those who try to do right are hated for their commitment to justice. Any society that exploits the poor, ignores the defenseless, or hates the truth is bent on destroying itself. And I like really being called to use my voice here and speak up for what my children and I have been through, because in the situation of dealing with the courts again, I moved out of the house for my own healing, nervous system healing and safety, and ended up being in a position where through spiritual awakening, this is where I talked about the spiritual psychosis earlier, like I ascended so quickly up into the upper ethers, and it's like you understand the whole universe, you understand what's going on around us, that like we're living in the hologram and the matrixes of our own making, and you are the creator of your own universe, your own reality. We are all fractals of source here having a human experience, but I didn't have any grounding. And then it was like time to take action, and it was all just like incredibly jarring. And I ended up really going back through a loop for like 6 months. And this is where the energetic wounding that comes in our wombs also happens, because I ended up having an intimate relationship with somebody that I felt was my obligation as part of moving through this awakening, and I was misread. It was misread in my discernment, and it ended up like I carrying the energy of people that are around you affects your own energy. And this is where again teaching our women and men to have intimate relationships with people that are aligned with you, and that our society has like normalized this hypersexuality and this like promiscuity, really, because it keeps you in low vibration. It keeps women's wombs wounded. You pick up the energy of the partners that you've had, and you can hold that for up to 7 years without clearing it first. And we're not telling anybody that. And it's also contributing to what we're seeing with birth defects and women that are having fertility issues and things of that nature. When your womb tissue is holding on to trauma from past relationships, like, yeah, we're going to have issues with that. That has to get cleared in order to have healthy pregnancies. You have to be living in authenticity for your chakras and energies to be cleared, and to clear disease and illness. And we're not teaching people this. And so through this scenario, I ended up losing custody of my children. And I disclosed to court officers and a child psychologist responsible for determining the custody of my children that my ex-husband was an alcoholic, that he was regularly driving under the influence, that he was regularly incredibly intoxicated at home with our children, alone and when other people were there, and that he had sexually assaulted me while under the influence during our marriage. And I was told those were domestic issues. not a matter for the courts. And it's like, I'm pretty sure that's all criminal activity. But I was told as a PTSD survivor, stay-at-home mom who was leaving an abusive relationship, had 2 small children and a disabled mother I was taking care of, that they were more concerned about me being around the children because of my PTSD, that they didn't want me to have some sort of like outburst with the children, and because of my spirituality. Because I no longer was following the organized religion Christianity version, and I was talking about my spiritual abilities. I was opening up about my shamanic abilities, that I worked in between realms, that I was a psychic medium, that I was receiving downloads from ancestors, from people who had passed on and were trying to get messages out about how they died and communicate through me and be a channel for source and for God's messages. And those things were used against me in court to call me an unfit mother, but nobody was concerned when I showed them. And also they really focused this on my use of plant medicine. So medicinal marijuana was used against me in court as well. And it was legal in the state I was living in. And I had a prescription for it for years. It wasn't new, for chronic pain and anxiety. And I was sharing my journey on social media and talking about cooking with it. And cooking with it for the purpose of gut healing. And because that is actually, consuming it is more the natural intention for cannabis. It wasn't really ever meant to be smoked. We've done that. But one of the healthiest ways to consume it is to cook with it. And I was using it topically as well, which is not for psychoactive effects. It's for fascial release and joint pain, because your energy, your negative energy and emotions are trapped in your fascia as well. So when you get fascial adhesions, it's literally holding on to stuff. And so that was used against me in court to call me unfit to be around my children. I bought a camper that I bought from people who sold me something they knew I couldn't tow. That was another discernment issue. And ended up being on this campground for 2 months, where they said I was a flight risk. And he was able to go in court. His attorney went into court, called me a flight risk because I bought a camper, and they were worried that I would just put the children in it and take off. Well, no one in the court asked me any questions about it. And I, in fact, bought something that I couldn't tow, or had the means to buy a vehicle to tow it. And it's like, at no point at all was I a flight risk, but nobody bothered to ask. They just took the word of my ex-husband's lawyer through everything. He was able to go into court, point fingers at me, lie about me, and nobody really asked me about it, nor did I know how to stand up for myself through the process. And as a diagnosed PTSD survivor and neurodivergent, nobody at any point, including my own lawyer, said, hey, this is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you have things that are available to you that you can use in these proceedings. No one said, hey, I heard you talk about all of the stuff that you were going through in therapy, talking about psychological abuse and emotional abuse and sexual abuse and the things that you experienced as a child and growing up around narcissistic adults as a child. And like, hey, we have these community therapeutic services, and we have these organizations that are here to help with whatever you're going through. Nobody said anything about any of that stuff. And that's where we're in here going, this is a call, right, to reform our social and justice systems, because this isn't justice. And I can't tell you how many women I've met over the last year that have lost custody of their children because they were leaving a narcissist, and the person that got custody of the children was the person who could afford the children, was the person who could pay for the children, not the person who's going to be a better emotional influence for children, who's going to help your children keep themselves regulated. No, none of that was taken into consideration at all. It was about who can afford the children. So we're going to give the kids to the guy that can pay for them, regardless of any history of behavior. But the alcoholism is fine, right? In the courts, nobody was worried about that. They're worried about the PTSD, and nobody's going, where'd the PTSD come from? Did it come from being married to an alcoholic for a really long time? Yeah. Nobody was worried about that. And I'm over here going, is anybody concerned about who's taking care of my children? Regardless of what I went through, regardless of what I am also healing. Now let's talk about who's taking care of my kids. And it's the person who was minimally invested as a father. And I'm not sitting here, this isn't about bashing him in particular. It's about pointing out the systems that don't work anymore. And you're not an alcoholic for 20 years without having unresolved emotional stuff going on. Like he kept, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need therapy. And number one, to indicate that someone who needs therapy or is choosing therapy, that there's something wrong with you for choosing therapy, that in itself is inappropriate. And number two, to act like being an alcoholic isn't an indication of something larger being at play. Alcohol is a numbing agent. You use it to mask. You use it to hide behind other things that you're feeling. And I emotional eat. Like, that's what I had to get under control. And I've been guilty of it the last few weeks. Like, there's been so many energies and things going on. And I've been holding all of this in. And not talking about it publicly and not like using it on a larger platform. And we have to tell it all now. Like, we got to tell it all. And I spent 6 months the last 6 months, really, I was camping on campgrounds out in the woods, like grounding and getting into Mother Nature. Like all the stuff that I was doing for the most part was for my nervous system, but I was still holding on to so much and was still going through so much. And like basically I was homeless. I'm in this camper right now. This is a whole nother story because I got into an accident the other day and now I'm staying with some friends and everything in here went So this is the first night I came out in here to like organize some stuff, and this is the first thing that I'm doing. And I really had this bigger spiritual call to head west and to really work in with the shamanic communities and really get more involved in indigenous communities and do some exploration and some healing. And I was scared to leave my kids. I was holding on to storage units. I was holding on to too much stuff. I was scared to leave my kids. And I ended up just like circling the drain is what I kept saying. And like every state that I have gone to has brought me something different from a different timeline. But this is all where, you know, this spiritual ascension and realizing that like it's a big game, really. And like detaching yourself completely emotionally from certain things is necessary for you to like eliminate fear and remember that like everything's going to be okay. Everything's all right. Everybody's got their own soul purpose, soul mission, their own path. And I was trying to force something that wasn't right. And I was doing things that were erratic and whatnot. And of course, I was a PTSD survivor who had zero support around me to stand up for me. Everybody in my support system turned their back on me because I was telling the truth about abuse, and nobody wanted to hear it. Because then they would have to admit that they were complicit in it as well. And they're complicit now, because it's when you're talking about the safety of children, if you aren't standing up for what's best for the children, the same people that are now supporting my ex-husband having my kids were the same people who were like, we never thought he was a good dad anyway. Well, we were wondering how long it was going to take you to leave. And it's like, WTF, people. You're going to sit here and tell me we were wondering how long it was going to take you to leave. But but you watched for years as it was happening. And this is where, like, what have we done to each other as women as well to, like, turn on each other in that respect where you just expect women to get through it because you're strong? Or like my ex-mother-in-law said, you know, my daughter-in-law having children, well, that's just what women do. But watching my son become a father, oh. And I'm like, there's something inherently wrong with that statement. Like, knowing what goes into having a child and looking at your daughter and saying, oh, well, women having kids, that's just what we do. Like, no, I am looking at her going, you beautiful queen, everything that we go through to carry children, like, how can I be here to support you? And that's what it was like in the villages. When women had babies, you were surrounded by women who were supporting you. You were surrounded by women who were taking care of you. Your children were birthed by the women of the village and the tribe. And we held each other. And now it's just every man for himself. It's a effing Wild West out there. And you're just expected to figure it out. And you know that's when you're in an unhealthy family unit. When everybody's just looking at you and expecting you to figure it out. And with no support. And it just, I refuse to believe that it has to be that way anymore. And I know we're in this place where it's like everything's falling apart and the good guys have already won. And because it's already done. But again, and again, as I sit here and wear this cross around my neck, what's the cross we each bear? Because Yeshua didn't come here specifically to be killed for us. He came here with a message to teach us a way of life, to talk about the stuff that I'm talking about right now. And he got killed for it. Because we are here to shine light on the false light. Shine light in the dark. To make all the creepy crawlies come out and go, what is happening in our court systems? That mothers who are leaving abusers are the ones who are being raked through the coals, having their children taken away, and then having the children completely subjected to abusers who are, even if you do get custody, I can't tell you how many women I know who are still having to deal with their abusive exes on a daily basis, berating them and creating two separate realities for their children to exist in, and their children are watching this happen, and the like, is anybody worried about the children? But you know, the more we share our stories and the more we talk about what we've been through and how we psychologically a lot of times don't even look at those situations as unhealthy either, because we've been manipulated into making them okay and letting it slide. And for example, there was another lady on Instagram, comedian, that recently shared a survivor story of hers, and it triggered me to remember about a time I was assaulted in college. And it was somebody I knew, and it was somebody I had previously had like a somewhat the beginnings of a romantic relationship with, and it was my birthday, and I was highly intoxicated. And, you know, he said he was going to take me home. My friends left me there with him and his friends because I knew them, I trusted them, and he said he was going to bring me home. He did not take me home. He took me to his apartment. And I used to say, slept with me, or had sex with me. And then years later, it was like, no, you were assaulted. When you are intoxicated, you are not able to consent. Period. And we're not teaching people that. And it was like a situation where I, like, looking back, would have liked to have had the relationship with my mother where I could have told her that and it be taken seriously, and my mother would have just been like, yeah, you got lucky on your birthday. Like, that's how we looked at it. Like, that's not getting lucky, that was being assaulted. And we should define it as such for other people, and then we should be there to support them in the recovery of having those occurrences happen to them. And I just not giving our children safe places to come to with information, and evaluating the fitness and health of a situation, of individuals, of people in your lives, of the scenarios that you are in, is so crucial as part of your discernment. And when you're with somebody who doesn't take care of their physical body, they're not going to take care of you either. When you're with somebody that doesn't value your opinion, they're not going to, that kind of stuff doesn't change. And when you're with somebody that you can see is outwardly saying, don't tell me what to do, but also incredibly, follow orders like a soldier without questioning, that's the problem. The blind obedience right there is the problem. And I realize in my divorce too, dealing with the court systems, that so much of it wasn't necessarily my ex literally coming after me himself. It was his attorney doing it, and his attorney doing it because it's procedure, and my ex sitting there watching as his attorney did it. And now it's a scenario after the fact too, that he just doesn't want me to be right about anything, and he can't control me. The children are the last bit of control that he has over me at this point, and so he's going to utilize that. And I'm dealing with people who don't like when I tell the truth. They don't want to talk about the things that they all saw and knew were going on for years at a time. And here's your indicators when you're listening to speech. My ex-mother-in-law, when I was trying to talk to her about something one day, says, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to you because you say things I don't want to hear. Not because you lie, not because you're not telling the truth. I don't want to listen to you because you say things I don't want to hear. Because I'm telling the truth. All the things that I'm saying have an impact. You just don't want to hear it, because then it implies that you were complicit in an unhealthy situation, or you contributed to the fact that your son was an alcoholic for 20 years. His marriage has suffered the entire time because of it. Everybody knew it, and nobody wanted to step in to assist. When I finally went, I can't do this anymore. And now I've been made out to be the bad guy for having different spiritual beliefs, for not having the finances to provide for my children, and for telling the truth. And I, for months, have honestly been spiraling because of it, and knew I wasn't being authentic, and knew I wasn't stepping into my full power, because I was really trying to grasp, holding onto my children and being in that submissive, he's got my kids and I'm appeasing what everybody else thinks so I can have access to them, instead of standing up for myself and being I'm sorry, this whole scenario is completely jacked up. And now I've been collecting information, I've been collecting contacts, and it's time to really openly talk about the injustice system, as I like to call it, and shine light on the dark, because we talk about what's happening with the children, we talk about taking care of our children. And like I said, there was a gentleman who shared a poem on TikTok yesterday that really hit me, about if you are not standing up for what you believe in, if you are seeing things going on that are unjust, and you're not speaking out, then you've picked a side, and you've picked a side with the abusers. And hang on. Sorry, I got a message I needed to respond to. Thank you. I did not see it. I'm staying at a friend's house right now, and I'm in this camper outside, and they're getting ready to go to bed, so I'm gonna respect their space as well. Um, so, whoops-a-doodle, there we go, now we're back. I ended up going through this whole scenario, giving custody to my ex because I felt like I didn't have a place to set up for my children, because again, it was like the regulation of my nervous system and going out on my own. Again, the psychological manipulation that you go through after 40 years of being raised by and groomed by narcissists, and breaking out of that. Like, I'm making decisions for myself now. I get to do what I want to do. I get to surrender to God's plan for me, to the universe, and when I say God's plan, we know that we are all pieces of God here having a human experience, but some of us, we came in with contracts. We came in with things that we agreed to do, and it's also about being authentic. And I was talking about the fitness and health and wellness of a relationship. There's all kinds of red flags and synchronicities that you can look out for to evaluate the health of the situation that you are in. And your own health is a big part of it, because the more disease and disorder and manifestation of illness that's in your body, it's an indicator that you are not living authentically to your own truth, and you've manifested feelings and things that you're holding in and that you're not releasing and letting out. So there's a lot to be said for that as well. And now my mermaid DNA is coming out. You see, mermaids were real, and they were incredibly powerful. And this is where you get into what I was talking about earlier with telling the truth and the wisdom to topple patriarchies and kingdoms, because they see what's going on. They controlled the currents, they controlled the waters, and it's a big old metaphor for our poison waters in this world and in this country. And the waters in our body are poisoned from the environments that we're in, and everything around you is mirror and metaphor. And you're looking at your mental health, your physical health, your environmental health, who's around you, what you're surrounding yourself with, and that all matters for your frequency and for your energy. And there's so much more that I am excited to talk about as going through this, but telling my truth of what I've lived through, and seeing how we're treating survivors in this court system is BS, and how we are, what we're providing for our children. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, no one was concerned about evaluating the fitness of the person that was taking care of my children. Now, he submitted to a psych evaluation, but who knows what he told them, because this is where you find people that are so used to wearing the mask. It's all about outward appearances, so they have this like different persona that they put on. He used to have what I would call like a work laugh, where he would be like completely frustrated, snippy, cut off, annoyed with me for trying to have a conversation with him, and then he'd get a work phone call, and immediately it's like, "Hey Jeff, hi, how are you? Oh yeah, and then hang up and immediately be back to, I don't know who you are, and you're too emotional, and I shut down because you want to talk about deep stuff." Well, yeah, when you're married to somebody and you're talking about how you're going to raise your children, I want to talk about deep stuff. Yeah, I want to talk about respecting one another. I want to talk about supporting one another. I want to talk about being healthy for one another. And leaving my marriage, I went on a complete spirit-led detox of my body. I lost over 80 pounds in 4 months because I cut out poison water, poison grains, poison dairy. I started doing a microplastic detox, a heavy metal detox, and like literally flushing all the stuff out of my body that had been in there for so long. And started doing sound therapy and light therapy and yoga and literally treating my body as the temple that it is for everyone. And that's what Yeshua came to teach as well, is that your body is your temple. It is your antenna. It is literally how you connect with the divine. It is how you trust your intuition. And it is all the stuff in America, again, that has been intentionally manipulated so that we don't know our own power. Why do you think our food is full of chemicals and processed stuff that our bodies aren't made to actually deal with? Clogs your gut up. Your gut is your initial brain, which connects to up here, and clogs everything up. And if you're in brain fog and not thinking clearly, you again are in that situation where you're just doing whatever you're told. And that is what's happening with trauma survivors. Like, you're just doing what you're told or what's comfortable because everything else is off. Your electromagnetic system is off. And that is, again, what's happening in the world around us with all the electronics, with all of the programming on TV and government and education and entertainment and our environment. As within, so without. What we've done to Mother Earth is an example of what we've done to our own bodies. And Mother Earth is covered in trash and plastic right now. So we have to take out the trash. And it, I'm very heavily reminded of this specific encounter that I had. Clearing out a storage unit, and my ex brought a bunch of his friends over to help, and I was standing there with two men. I like to refer to it as the BP oil spill. My downloads that I get, past life interactions that I've had with them, I get this very like guerrilla, like goon style, like mafia, Sopranos vibe. This just like greasy, like oily, dirty cop. Yeah, like mafia vibe from them. And it's the control and the power and the women as possessions. It's very much of like an old Italian, like where the boys were babied and had everything done for them, and creating this race of man children who expect everything to be done for them and just want to run the house and don't have to answer to anybody, and wifey's at home taking care of everybody and feeding all the children and taking care of home and barely herself, and she just wants her partner to come home and spend time with her, but she's made out to be the nagging wife for wanting a partner that comes home and spends time with her while they're out, at the strip clubs or at the restaurants with their buddies, with their bros before hoes and their girlfriends. And that is so much of like this trauma bonded circle of individuals that I was in, and I kept it, especially my plant medicine ceremonies, it kept coming through like, it's not yours to carry anymore. They're not yours to fix. They're not yours to wake up, but shining a light in the dark on the control mechanisms that are existing in toxic masculinity, and how men are also trained to do this and they don't know any better. But I take that back. I was in this scenario with these three men, and I called it the BP oil spill because they all had initials of BP, and it was like looking at three different versions of like my ex-husband. It's like in various stages, and the other two I had looked at as people who took care of themselves or people who provided for their families, and I had looked to them as like mentors to him, of like, spiritual men or men that stood up for their family, like help guide him in this scenario. I'm about to be homeless, I'm the mother of his children, and I'm asking for help. And literally all of them told me that I was unworthy of help because I'd mismanaged my money. I don't disagree that I mismanaged the money. That wasn't the point. The whole point was, you made my life less valuable than money. You were unwilling to assist me in having somewhere to live as the mother of your child because you didn't like the way I managed my money. The money that I was managing was also my own IRA that I cashed out in order to live off of for months after we split, because he was giving me no alimony. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I stopped taking care of my mom, so I didn't have any income. And was a PTSD survivor working on my nervous system. Yes, it was during a massive spiritual awakening, but all of those things, like, this is what's wrong with the justice system. Our court system should have been like, hey, let's take a look at this stay-at-home mom who was taking care of everybody except for herself, to the point where she was actually diagnosed with PTSD and willing to walk out of her home that had her 2 small children in it because she felt like she was that unsafe. Should we make sure she's okay? And our system is like, no, and let's give him the kids. And then you keep going through your dark nights of the soul, and you're like, oh, your soul agreed to come here and do a lot of this so that you could use your voice and stand up for the people in your lineage that were silent for so long, and for the other women who have been silenced and or murdered. Because when you get into most situations like this, a lot of the times in women who are in psychologically abusive or domestic violence based scenarios, they don't get out alive. And I'm healing a wound for my mother. My mother was a survivor of domestic violence. Her first husband beat her in my grandparents' home where they lived, and our entire family didn't believe her. And I opened up and started telling the truth about psychological, emotional, financial, and sexual abuse to everyone in my family, and my family didn't believe me either. And so my message to survivors is, I believe you. I believe you, and I stand with you. And your story matters. And justice matters. That is my message to survivors. Everyone's story matters. Do you hear me? You matter. And if nobody else told you today, I love you. And I mean it, because we're all one. And in this process, and I've been separated from my children for a year now, having to take accountability for my own actions of not knowing how to stand up for myself, and the times where I was too scared to do so, or too scared to reach out to the right people, or living in this fear-based existence where, like, my children are the ones at the end game of this, and no one is like, hey, should we, like, I'm like, can we get the kids in therapy, please? Hi, can we get the kids some resources so they can learn about who they truly are? Let's give their mother a voice about their religious exposure, because they're being exposed to things that are teaching them that they're bad. And like, it just, the checks and balances in place to look out for my children and to look out for me as their mother and as a trauma survivor are completely out of whack. Completely out of whack. And this is where our children are now going into those repetitive cycles where they're already starting to show signs of trauma. And my requests for exposing them to things that could help them work on that are ignored. And that's not okay for our kids. So this is a call to action for me to, again, we're standing up for what we believe in, and we're starting to finally speak out against our court systems and the religious systems that are keeping people in a fear, shame-based existence. And this is the first episode I've recorded where I've been really upfront about everything that's been going on for the last year. And I finally am in a place now where I've made some connections and made some friends where people are like, hey, do you want to stay with us for a while you like get stuff together, and we can all help each other, and we're like-minded, and we are here to help trauma survivors, and we recognize you as a human being. When did our value become based on our ability to perform versus just to be human and exist? Because our existence is enough. But believing that you have to produce and perform in order to be worthy, that's the manipulation. You're worthy no matter what. And that's what Yeshua came to teach as well. He also came to talk to us about mushrooms. Microdosing with psilocybin is the other thing that was used against me in court to call me an unfit mother, which I began doing in a very spirit-led mission and began doing to increase neuroplasticity and to treat trauma. And it has been incredibly helpful. And the legislation now starting to get passed for plant medicine healing, especially for PTSD survivors and especially working with vets. I want to say, I am trying to remember, was it Kate Bush on Instagram did a post recently about like 8 to 10 states, I'm going to have to look at that and pull it up, that are passing legislation for psilocybin research for trauma survivors. And guess what? It's because it works. It opens up your neuroplasticity. It helps to connect, literally helps you connect the patterns and the things that you have been doing in your life. And it's not for everybody. I'm not sitting here saying everybody needs it. Some people, breath work is most effective. Some people, meditation is most effective, or a combination of various things. But there are some people who have been through some trauma, and sometimes plant medicine is the only answer for them, or is the only thing that they have found to be incredibly helpful and useful. And guess what? Plant medicine was the original medicine, right? It's not that like, I was actually put in my divorce papers that they considered me unstable for choosing natural methods of healing as opposed to big pharma. You said it right there. Natural methods of healing. Now we start to talk about the court systems that handed my 2 small children over to somebody who had over decades long history of alcohol abuse, and did not support a mother as a trauma survivor trying to get her nervous system regulated so that she could then be the best mother possible. That's where our system's backwards. And opening up about, I'm sitting here with two pamphlets in front of me, one for the Care Healing Center, and it says You Matter, a guide for self-care after trauma. And this is one of the organizations that I was involved with in the local community in Maryland where I was, and it is holistic self-care and healing after trauma. And so much of the stuff that I was doing, painting, photography, reading, meditating, going for nature walks, yoga, exercising, taking a nap or a bath, cuddling with pets, being social, talking about your feelings, creating healthy space. And those are all the things that I was judged for in being a trauma survivor and being a parent. And the other one that just fell out of this binder for me yesterday is about intimate partner violence and your health. And the things that people don't look at to call violence, domestic violence, constantly criticizing you, controlling your money, having sudden mood changes, monitoring your activities, keeping you away from family and friends, accuse you of having affairs. There's forcing you to have sex or hurting you sexually, stopping you from seeing a doctor, take away medicine. I mean, I'm not saying all of this specifically for me, but these are all things that, psychological, emotional, and verbal abuse are all abuse. Economic abuse. Like, the financial situation I experienced was that I stayed home with our children. My ex made well over $100,000 to $150,000 a year. I never saw any of his pay stubs. I never got to see any of his specific financial information. He had a spreadsheet that he managed. And when I asked to be involved in the finances, it was always pushed off. I could have been more assertive, but it was always pushed off. And he paid for our mortgage, like the expenses related to our house. And I, staying home with our 2 small children, agreed to take care of my mom almost full time. We had part-time help with her so that I could have some kind of income, because I was told, you can't just stay home with the kids, you have to bring in some kind of money. I can't cover all of this by myself. So then I had to, I chose to take care of my mother. I was making less than $50,000 a year before taxes, paying my own cell phone bill, paying my car insurance, giving him money every month for my car insurance, paying for all the groceries for our households, paying for the kids' clothes and things that they needed. I had a credit card with I was an authorized user on his credit card. Very rarely ever used it, and never used it without telling him. And ended up having to get my own credit card. This is where we look at, like, predatory lending, where I used his income and my income to get a higher limit credit card. But he wasn't paying any of it. I was the only one paying for it. And I was using it at, like, Costco for literally predominantly all of our groceries and stuff. I was using it for stuff for the kids too. But it ended up being a situation where I was stuck with all this credit card debt on a card with a limit that I couldn't afford because it was based off both our incomes, which was inaccurate because he wasn't paying for any of it. And I was in a situation where I was putting stuff in the credit card because I was expected to cover more expenses in the home than I was actually generating income to cover. And we weren't sitting down and communicating about any of this. And then as a stay-at-home mom, when I left and wasn't taking care of my mom anymore, because I was like, literally, I am a trauma survivor that needs to heal my nervous system. And knowing that it was very spirit-led as well, I was given zero consideration. Like, that's financial abuse. Literally not having access to any of the joint, like, any finances in the home, being forced to bring in wages to cover expenses for the home that I couldn't afford. Like, the entire situation was completely out of balance. And then immediately it was like, when you left the court and everybody looked at me, the lawyers looked at me and said, well, you need to prove that you can go get a job, you can get somewhere to live, that you can stand on your own and you can provide for your children. And no one said, hey, trauma survivor whose world just got turned upside down, do we have somewhere for you to rest or to recover, to feel safe for a little while? No, our system did not do that. Our system didn't say, what treatments can we help put in place for you as a trauma survivor that's going to help you get back on your feet and get your system regulated so that you can be present in your children's lives. And all I still get now is lectures about how for the last year he's been their father. I've been here being their father. What have you been doing? I'm glad you've had this time to work on yourself. It hasn't been time to work on myself. It has been time to heal my nervous system after 40 years of trauma. And remember who we are as divine, intergalactic beings that are here for the Great Awakening. That is at the crux of it, is that I chose to be a vessel for God's work. And that while your energy systems and your nervous system are blocked and out of sync, you cannot be a vessel for God's work until those things are aligned, because your energies are off and everything gets discombobulated if your flow and your chakras is off. Like, if your energy flow is off and your nervous system's jacked up, existence is difficult. And now that so many people are starting to wake up and realize what's going on around them and set boundaries and get out of these abusive relationships, everybody's nervous systems is like, oh shit. So that's where you're going to have systems of healers in place ready to help you do all the stuff that it took us years to figure out how to do. But intimate partner violence, trauma survivors, I believe you, and let's start telling our stories. Okay? Ooh, it was 1:44 on the timer when I said that. I believe you. 9 times out of 10, you've been through those things and survived them because you're here for something bigger, because you're here for something greater, because you're here for a purpose, and your story matters, and getting it out is incredibly important. And reclaiming your power as a divine feminine through your womb is also very important, and clearing the trauma that exists in your womb. 14444 is how we will rebalance a lot of that as well. And I'm going to get more into that in my next episode. The next episode, smoke weed every day. That's actually part of it, is cannabis therapy, plant medicine, and Egyptian sex magic. You got it, going into the ways of the Isis priestesses, and that is a lot of what's been hidden from us. And Mary Magdalene and Yeshua were a divine twin flame union here to teach us the ways of Tantra and Kundalini and use of plant oils and plant medicine and natural healing methods, meditation, dance, music. Everything is energy, everything is light, everything is sound, everything is symbology. And that is so much of what has been taken away from us. And so we are putting those healing modalities back in place, and we are using our voices and opening our throat chakra. You see that little key dangling right in front of my throat? To be the change we want to see in the world, and actually talking about all of this openly, publicly, making connections with the right organizations who are doing this work already, and sharing our stories, because the more of us that speak up about what we've been through, we heal together. And I want to thank Isis for being here with us through this very special conversation. Ooh. Yeah. And Pocahontas, Mother Earth, again, what we have done to nature, what we have done to each other. Like, peace and unity is where we're going to thrive from. It doesn't work when there's an imbalance of power. When it is patriarchy over matriarchy, it doesn't work. When it is matriarchy over patriarchy, it doesn't work. When we are in balance and unity with each other, when you are giving each other the royal treatment that you deserve as a human being, that's when it works. And that's where we are. So we just have to be the change that we want to see in the world and keep our frequencies high. And that also means telling your story and speaking your truth and not keeping it locked inside, because when you keep it locked inside, it manifests, and it manifests into cancer, it manifests into disease, it manifests into illness. And we can reverse age, we can heal those things, but it also involves releasing the energy, the energetic manifestation associated with whatever you're holding in. So, with that said, I'm going to say thank you for sticking around with me if you made it all the way to the end tonight. I have so much more that I want to share in general, but this was a really good, just authentic telling of what has happened through the last several years, and especially the last year with custody of my children and my own accountability in being scared to step into the power of using my voice, and knowing that at the end they're the ones who have been where they are for the past year, that they've been separated from me for so long. Today was my daughter's birthday, and she said, "Mommy, I was just bummed you weren't here," which in general, her father basically told me I wasn't allowed to come to their birthday party, and he pulled this, like, I didn't tell her she couldn't be here on your birthday, but if you were celebrating her birthday at your parents' house, like, I wasn't invited. Let's be honest, I wasn't invited. And it is just, It's the why. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? To be a voice for the voiceless, to speak up for our children, to speak up for our elderly, to speak up for our trauma survivors who don't know how to speak up, because I hadn't for a long time either. And so here we are. So thank you for being here. If you have lived through something similar or have your own story to tell, I would love to hear from you. I am putting my email and my phone number. Call me. Okay? This was to a point where before I left, I was in functional alcoholism. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was having suicidal ideation. Like, I was on the verge of ready to take my own life with 2 small children because I was that unhappy in my marriage and trying to pretend that everything was okay. There were days where I would literally think, if I was gone, would he even notice? Would he notice? And that's not okay. And those of us who are diagnosed with these very heavy mental health disorders are usually people who have experienced very incredible amounts of trauma, and or you're incredibly spiritually in tuned and have never been taught how to manage it, and it manifests into things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, where you're hearing voices, you just don't know that it's in the spirit realm and how to control any of it because no one ever taught you. And our kids that are showing up now with ADHD diagnoses and autism and depression and stuff, guess where they're getting it from? The parents. Right? It's manifesting from the environment that they are existing in and from the permission we haven't given them to be children. And the joy of a child is what gives you entrance into heaven. God loves you unconditionally. Like, you are a piece of God. Source Creator loves you unconditionally, no matter what. There's nothing you could do more or less to be loved. Yeshua came to teach us unconditional love, but also the path of Christ addresses injustice, addresses institutions that are doing things for inappropriate reasons or are doing things that have a negative effect on humanity. We're talking about human rights, people. We're talking about human rights, and we all have them. So stand up, speak out, stand up for what you believe in, because ultimately it's for the children. Okay? So if you have a story you want to share, I'm going to put my email address, my phone number in the show notes. I'm going to provide some resources for trauma survivors as well, because it is incredibly important. And I am going to keep you updated on additional steps and actions I'm taking to share my story, hold the courts accountable, and get my children back. So, just a happy little Sunday night. All right, thank you for being here. Thank you for existing, because you matter, and I love you. And this has been Patriot Princess Podcast, P3, the power of 3. My Trinity, light magic, dark magic, when they blend together, who I had to be for women, supporting them all, getting ready for the ball. My whole life in the swamp, kissing frogs, not waiting for my Prince Charming, because I listened to all the other women going, just give him a chance. He's such a good guy. He's such a good guy. Well, he was a good guy to you. He treated me like shit, but okay. And Mother Earth, the one who stands up for peace, the one who stands up for unity, the one who remembers how entwined we are with our earth magic and with each other. And look, she's right there in between those little mushrooms over there, huh? So, thank you for being here. You matter, I love you. And have a good night.